All right, we're back with lesson 2, part 2. So we spent the first part of class looking at closures. What I want to talk about, we're going to look at the rest of class is NPM or Node Package Manager. So we touched on it briefly. So these slides are in the lesson 1 folder. And they're part of kind of the slide deck I had posted last week. So Node, when we install it, it's very lean. It's not like installing, something like the .NET framework, which has a much bigger footprint and comes with a lot of things pre-installed. So Node is designed to be very lightweight, and the idea is that we should use NPM to extend the functionality of Node as needed. So NPM is this online, it's this public registry, much like the NuGet registry that we use with ASP.NET. And it has a CLI, a command line interface for us to be able to manage our packages. So we're going to play around with NPM. So to install a package, the command is really simple. We'll just run the command npm I and then the name of our package. All package names, they don't have spaces in them. So if they have multiple words in them, those words will typically be separated with dashes. So for example, later on in a few weeks, we'll want to install the Express package. So the command will be npm I express. So if we go and take a quick look at the npm site, which is npmjs.org, we can get a kind of a sense of what sorts of things are on npm. So can anybody think about what might be, we use NPM for adding additional functionality into our Node applications. So what might be something that you think we might want to use an NPM package for? What's some common functionality we see in a web app that rather than writing all the code ourselves, we should be able to just go out and find an existing NPM package? Okay, something like weather, React, e-commerce. All right, let's have a look. So let's see, there we go. Module for obtaining weather information. Great suggestion, Jason. So when we look, it'll tell us how many other dependencies this package has, how many NPM packages depend on this, and it gives us the command npm install, which still works, although it's now been shortened to npm I, right? So here's the command right here. We can copy it. And then it usually gives us some documentation. So how would we use the weather package? Well, we would install it. We would require it. And then we've got a callback function here where we could search, run a callback, and our callback would either return an error or some kind of result. And then we could log it out. So it also shows us how popular a particular package is. Usually, most of the packages are open source, so there's usually a link to GitHub. So we could find it. And typically the docs are here. So there's one. Yeah, let's look at another. So Boogra mentioned React or Bootstrap. So yeah, here's we want a React front end. So it's a JavaScript library for doing UI. We would require it. And pretty popular, 11 million weekly downloads of this NPM package. Brad mentioned something like Wiki. So we want something like Wiki client in our node. Yep. So here's a package to allow us to generate a wiki in Node. So we'll actually go and we're going to play around with some of these. So where do the packages go? There's really two options. Most of the time when we install a package, it's going to be installed for the particular app we're building. So we want it to go inside of our project. And what it will do when we install a package is NPM will check for a folder called node_modules. If this folder already exists, then the npm packages we install will go inside of node modules. If the folder doesn't exist and we go to install our first package, Node will create the folder. However, it's also possible, so we can run uninstall, we can update packages, but we also have this ability to install packages globally. So these are things like development utilities that we want to install globally on our machine so we can use them in different node projects. And we'll install both local and global packages today in our app. We can update the packages because sometimes there are bug fixes that come out, there are patches, there are new versions, so we can run npm update and the name of the package, and that way npm will download the latest copy of the source code from GitHub. One of the other important files we're going to work with is called package.json. So most Node applications, we have a lot of dependencies. So package.json is as the name implies, it's a JavaScript object notation file that keeps track of all of the dependencies that our app has and what versions they're in. Give you an idea of what this might look like in a actual Node application. Let me go here, see if I can find. So here's a Node application. That's not the right one. Bear with me. So this is a Node application done as a research project for a client through the college. So here's the package.json file. So the application has a name, it has a version code, and then you can see all of these dependencies. These are all of the npm packages that we used. So Bootstrap, which Booger mentioned, cookie parser module, Express, an error handling module, JSON web token for authentication through our API, Mongoose, which we're going to use later, which is the library for connecting to MongoDB, Node Mailer for sending email notifications, Passport for user authentication, Twilio for SMS notifications, and OAuth as well. So all of these, and then, so these are the dependencies at runtime the application would need. There's also a separate section called the development dependencies. So we use this tool called Nodemon. We're going to use it today. Nodemon allows a hot reload in a Node application. So when we save changes, the Node server will automatically restart. You might remember last week when we changed our file, when our web page was running, we had to stop the server and then restart it. So Nodemon will automate that process. So this is what a package.json might look like. So we're going to build one of these files. You think, wow, that's fairly complicated. This is mostly automated. We don't actually, we can build the file manually, but we don't have to. So I'm going to show you that in just a minute. So here's a really simple package.json file. It just says the app name, the version, and a couple of dependencies. But there's actually a little command line tool that will give us a bunch of prompts, and then it will generate the package.json file for us. So the command we're going to run to do this is npm init. If we initialize npm in our project, then this command line tool will build package.json for us. So let's try this out. I'm going to go back to my terminal. I'm going to hit CLS to clear it out. So I'm going to run the command, and I want you to do this along with me. Let's run the command npm init. And hit enter. So it says this utility will walk you through creating a package.json file. It only covers the most common items and tries to guess sensible defaults. So package name, and then it shows me in round brackets lesson1 because that's the name, same name as my folder. So I can either type a different name for my package, or I can just hit enter to accept. It suggests the version code be 1.0.0, which is again fine with me. I'll hit enter. It asks for a description. You can leave it blank if you want. I'll put it in as our first node app and hit enter. The entry point. So it's saying, what's kind of the startup file for running the app? And it's suggesting it finds the first file here, which is blocking.js. Instead, I'm going to change this to our webserver.js. So when the app starts, it will load the webserver.js file first. It has a command for running unit tests. I'm going to ignore this, so I'm just going to hit enter. It's asking, is this application, does it have a Git repository? So because I've initialized Git and connected it up, it already has my Git remote. If yours is blank, that's fine. You don't have to have a Git remote. You can always supply one later. I'm just going to hit enter, and so can you. Keywords. Again, we can ignore this, so I'm just going to hit enter. The author. I'll put in my GitHub username, but you don't have to. A license. So default, it gives us several choices for open source licensing. I'll just hit enter. And then it gives me a preview of the file. It says we're about to write package.json, and you can just hit enter all the way through if you want. So there's no test specified under testing scripts. It's got my Git repository. Bugs can be reported on the issue tab, and it's expecting a README. Is this okay? So I'll just hit enter. And now our package.json is automatically added to the file, to the folder. So let's actually try. We're going to use a few packages today. Maybe we'll go and try that weather. Jason suggested, hey, maybe we want a weather NPM package. Let's try it out. And we can follow the documentation on the NPM page to follow this example and see if this works. So this package is called weather-js. So if we want to install it, we can run either this command here, npm install weather-js, or the shortcut npm I weather-js. So I'm going to try that. So I'm going to run the command npm I weather-js. So you can even copy it directly from. Here's the link on npm. We've got the copy button for the install command up here. I like to type the commands. I find I learn them better. So I'm going to run npm I weather-js. So I'm not going to worry about these warnings for now. So now if I go back and click on my folder, notice we now have a node modules folder. And in here, we have weather.js. It appears in blue. And then these folders in red, these are all the dependencies, all the other packages that weather.js requires. So often when we install one package, we got 50 more. So now we can try out this package by using the sample code that's on the NPM website. So let's make a file here. We'll make a new JavaScript file. We'll call it weather. And we can basically copy the code that's here for usage. We're going to require the weather package we just installed. And then we're going to call weather.find. First, I'll try this example, and then I'll try changing the location. So I'll just copy that code. It's in the usage section, and the link is in the chat. And this could probably be let. Try weather module from So I'm going to try running this code exactly how it is. So we're requiring the module. We're using a callback function. We're passing in a couple of options as a JSON object, a search value, and a degree type value. And here's our callback. So they use this syntax. We could also rewrite it and use the lambda expression instead. So when we call the weather library, it's either going to return an error or a result. And then we're going to log the error or a JSON representation of the result. So I haven't changed this code at all. It's just strictly copy and paste. So what would we need to do if we want to try this file out? How could we run it? See if we get, you got it, thanks Adam. We can just run node weather. All right. So this gives us San Francisco, California, gives us the longitude and latitude, the time zone, the degree type, gives us the current temperature in Fahrenheit. Kind of cool. What if I switch this around? So it says we can put in the location name. Notice if we put in San Francisco, it also gives us San Francisco, Costa Rica. I'm going to change the location to a postal code. What if I put in, let's say, the college postal code? I think it's 3x9. And I'm going to change the degrees from Fahrenheit to Celsius. So you could try any location. You could try your hometown, your favorite place to visit. I'm going to save that change. So this L4M3X9, that's Georgian's postal code. Let's see what the weather is here at Georgian. So I'll clear my terminal. I'm going to run the weather app again. All right, so now we get a different result here. So our temperature is 18 Celsius. Last observed 11:45 a.m. This is the postal code of where. We've got our humidity, we've got the day, the wind speed, as well as we have the forecast. That includes yesterday, today, tomorrow, Friday. So it gives us, the upcoming forecast as well for yesterday and the next several days. So all we had to do was install the command, install the package using the command line, and copy their sample documentation to try this out. Anybody have any questions so far about working with NPM? Find the package, install it, try the sample code, and then customize it the way we want to. Okay, we're going to try another couple packages with NPM. I'm going to make a new file. I'm going to make a new JavaScript file. We will call it tax. We're going to make a simple tax calculator. So you get a blank file. Use HTTP module to run in the browser. So just like we did last week, we're going to require the HTTP module. So this is not, we don't have to install this through NPM. This comes with, this is one of the few libraries that comes with Node when we install Node. We're going to start the web server. So we'll call create server with our request and response, and then our callback function. So just like we did last week, we're going to first write the header with a 200 response. We'll set our content type. Last week we used text plain as the content type. This time we actually want an HTML response. So our content type is actually going to be text/HTML. And our char set will be UTF-8. So this time our response is HTML. So now we should actually be able to write an H1 tag. So we'll write out that response. We'll end the response, and then we'll tell our server to listen on port 3000, the same as we did last week. So write some content. So this is basically the same as what we did last week with our web server example. The only difference so far is last week in our web server, we used plain text as the format, right? Our content type was text plain, whereas today our content type is text/HTML. And we can just run server running port 3000. So again, we'll log out a message to the console. Semicolons. We'll print out a message saying our server is running. So what would we do? How would we launch this file and check it out, see what happens? We'll start with the basic file. We're going to add npm to it in a minute. So we're using HTTP, we're creating the server, and when we get a request come in, every time our callback, we'll write an OK header, set the format of HTML, print an H1 tag, and end. And our server is going to listen constantly for new HTTP requests. So how do we run this and test it out? Thanks, Adam. So we're going to run node and tax. So it tells me the server's running on port 3000. That's good. How do we where do we go to actually see the page? Right. Thanks, Adam. So now if we go to our browser and just hit localhost 1000. Here's our page, and notice it's big. The text is big and bold. If we view the page source, right, we've got HTML tags here. So it's working so far the way we want it to. Now, one of the problems, as we saw from last week, is we want to make some more changes to this file. The problem is, now that the server is running, every time we make a change, we've got to stop the server and then restart it again. So we want to use a global package, this utility called Nodemon, which will automatically restart our web server every time we save a change. So if I go over back to the NPM site and search Nodemon, it's a simple monitoring script for use during development of a Node.js app. Well, that's what we want. So it's a tool that will automatically restart when file changes are detected. And typically we want to install this globally. We can install it in this project, but it means if we make a new project next week, we won't have Nodemon, we'd have to reinstall it. So by installing the package globally, we can use it for any Node project on our computer. You can see it's very popular, 4 million downloads a week. So I'm going to hit Control-C to stop my server. And now we're going to run the command npm I nodemon -g. So -g for global. We're not just using Nodemon in this project. We want to use it in all the projects we do at any time. So I want you to run this command, npm I nodemon -g. Hit enter. I'll put it in the chat as well, npm I nodemon -g. So we've added Nodemon. Nodemon also has 119 dependencies of its own. Sorry, 118 dependencies of its own. So how big is this? How big is our app getting? Let's see. If we open this in File Explorer, how big are these packages? Well, not too bad. Even though it's a lot of packages, they're small, our footprint's still tiny. It's still only 5 megabytes. which is not a lot. So this time what I want to do is I want to restart the server, but I want to use the Nodemon utility because now it will mean we can make more changes to our files and we don't have to stop and restart the server. So this time, if I run the Nodemon command, it will start the server again, but now it's going to watch for changes. So I'll run the command nodemon tax. Notice it says to restart anytime, enter RS, and now it's watching JS, MJS, and JSON files for changes. So as soon as it sees any of those being saved, it's going to restart. So my server's running again on port 3000. So maybe we want to change, let's say we just want to change this H1 to, let's say, like an H3. So it should shrink the text on our page. I'll go back here. I'm changing my H1 to H3. I'll click Control S, and notice as soon as I do that, we get a message in green saying it's restarting due to changes. And again, we get our server running message. Now, if I go back to the browser and refresh, right, our heading shrunk. I'm going to put it back to H1. I want the bigger text, but we can see that now Nodemon has removed this stop, start to remove that step for us by watching for changes. So I'm just going to undo that change, resave, Nodemon starts again, and I'm back to H1. Okay, Cameron, this looks like a permissions issue, like a security warning. Okay, hang on. I got to plug my laptop in. Let's do a little digging about how we get around that. Okay, Nodemon PS1 is not digitally signed. Let's see what we can do about that. There should be a fix for this. Okay, so yes, here is the exact issue. So you can, if you modify the execution policy in Windows PowerShell, then it should work. And as people are saying, there is no security risk whatsoever with allowing remote sign scripts to run. So first, you may have to go and delete the Nodemon PS1 file. I will put this link in the chat. Probably a number of you are having that issue. So there's several fixes here. This person also said you can just delete that nodemon.ps1 file. Nodemon is not absolutely critical, but it does save you a lot of time. Yeah, a lot of people are saying just delete the nodemon.ps1. that will also work. So you don't necessarily have to run the PowerShell command, but you can. Okay, so what we want to actually have happen on this page, we want to do more than just print out a heading. What we want is to be able to do this. We want to be able to show total equals, let's say 100. We want to be able to pass in a variable in our URL with a number, and then we want to calculate the tax and the total. Actually, I guess it would be something like subtotal. So if we have this URL, we want the page to say subtotal 100, tax $13, total $113. And we also will want to format all of those as currency. So we'll do the math first, and then we'll add a package that's going to handle the currency formatting for us. Here. So after we write this stuff, first thing we want to get is read the URL parameter string, which is the part after the question mark. So we'll create a variable called query, and we can use Node's built-in URL parsing library where we can take the incoming request so this is going to give us the piece of the URL. And notice here, I'm getting an error. It's saying, oh, we don't recognize URL. You forgot to import the Node library. Hang on, that's not what we want. I'm sorry. The module we need is called URL. Bear with me for a second. Maybe updated the library. Okay, it's deprecated. That's all right. We'll use it for now. Good enough. So for now, let's just console.log the query. So let's see what this gives us. This should give us whatever comes after the question mark. I just save that change. So this could be let or const really. We're requiring the URL library. And then we're trying to parse any parameters from our URL and then just print them to the console. So I've added line 3, as well as line 14 and 15. Let's try this out, see what happens. So if I refresh my page, it tells us, here's our query. Subtotal is 100. So now we're going to grab subtotal param from the URL. So we're going to take that subtotal value out of our URL. We're going to store it in a variable. We're going to calculate the tax and the total. How would we calculate tax? What math equation do we need here? We've got a subtotal of, let's say, 100. Thank you, Adam. That would be for the total, yep. So for the tax, we're going to multiply the subtotal by 0.13. And then our total, we could either multiply subtotal by 1.13 or we can add them together. Right? Both would work. And now we want to display the values. Oops. So in our response, we're now going to write out maybe an H2. It says subtotal. Then we're going to put the subtotal in here. Then let's put a line break and another H2. This one will say tax. And our last one will say, oops, I guess a colon should go inside the H2. Sorry, I got my quotes. My quote's a little mixed up. So we're going to grab the subtotal from the URL. We're going to use it to calculate the tax and the total. And then we want to display all three values back to the browser before we end the response. So I'm going to save that change. Nodemon should automatically restart for us. And move this around so we can see both the browser and the code at the same time. So I'm going to refresh this, and I've got a subtotal value of 100 here. So when I refresh, here's what we get. Subtotal 100, tax 13, and 10,013 as our total. What happened? It's mostly right. Yeah, Chris, why is it considered a string? Why did it append these together as a string rather than adding them? Yeah, because JavaScript it's weakly typed. It has some notions of data types, but it's all implicit with JavaScript. It's not like C# or Java, which are strongly typed languages. When we create a variable, we've got to say, hey, this is a float, it's an integer, it's a string. So our JavaScript compiler, it just kind of assumes that, well, these are strings, so it appends them together. So what we want to do is make sure that we explicitly cast this as a float. So I'm going to parse this. So we're going to use parse float. So JS doesn't treat this as a string. I'm just going to ignore that warning. So by using parse float, we're explicitly casting that subtotal value. Now we should probably make sure that if I put in something else, different subtotal, yeah, that works. So it seems to work. Burger, you get that object in your code editor or at runtime in the browser? Or in the console? Yeah, I actually have it too. It's just this console log. We could take that console log out. That error should go away. I'll look at a more efficient way. There's a more efficient way now. This is deprecated. I'll review a better way to parse that. So we should do one more thing with this. This is the last thing we're going to do today. So I'm going to keep you just a few minutes longer, and then we can get out of here around 1 o'clock. Okay. What else should we do with this to clean it up? Calculations are right. Formatting's terrible. Yeah, we could round it, and we can format it as currency. So I'm actually want to use one more NPM package to do this. So we're going to use another NPM package called accounting. It is a number, money, and currency formatting library. Small library for parsing, formatting, rounding. So we're going to want to run npm I accounting. And then it tells us, here's the link to the documentation. So some simple examples. So it's got a format money function we can use. And it will do both the rounding as well as give us a currency symbol in one go. So my terminal is locked because Nodemon's running the server. So I do need to stop the server first because I need the terminal in order to install the accounting package. So I'm going to click Control-C, stop the server for a moment, and then we're going to run npm I accounting. We don't need to install it globally. We're not using it in other projects. We're only using it in this project. So I'm going to omit, I'm going to leave out that -G. So run npm I accounting. It's pretty small, so it installs quickly, and there are no dependencies. Now, we've taken the web page down, right? We've stopped the server in order to install accounting. So if I go back and try to reload it, we're going to get this, that it can't connect to our web server. So I need to use Nodemon to relaunch the tax file, restart our web server. So I run it again. Server's running on port 3000. My calculator's back. So now what we want to do is use the accounting library. We've installed the package. We're going to need to make a reference to it. And then we can wrap these values with the format money function in that library. So we're going to require the library up at the top. So add the reference, and typically the variable name we assign typically matches the name of the package, unless the package is really long. And this is cool. Notice my WebStorm, it actually gives us the description here. So the function we want to use, we just call accounting.formatMoney, and then we pass in our numeric value. And this is what it'll do. It'll round it and give us the appropriate currency symbol based on the regional settings of our web server. So I'll call accounting.formatMoney and pass in subtotal. So this should show it as dollars and cents. So when I refresh now, my subtotal shows as $49.98. If I don't put any cents at all, it'll just round it to $49.00. So then the last thing we want to do is to apply this same format money function. We want to wrap both tax as well as total in this same function. So now, all three of these numeric values should show as currency, and they'll be rounded. So now I can pass in any amount. Things are rounded to the nearest cent and formatted properly. So we've used this little accounting library just to extend the functionality of our app. So we've actually used three packages today. We used weather to get the current weather. We've used accounting for rounding numbers, formatting currency. And we've used Nodemon as a development utility to automatically restart our web application after we've saved changes to it. And everything is tracked. If I go back to package.json, you'll notice that when we run those npm I commands, notice it automatically updates package.json. So we didn't add these two lines. The npm install process automatically adds the dependencies into package.json for us. Okay. That was pretty much everything we wanted to do today. I'm going to push all my code up to GitHub. I haven't used the Git window in WebStorm. Well, I can just go to my terminal, stop my server. We'll add the files. Now, I don't have a git ignore for Node right now. So actually, I don't want, this is the last thing I'm going to do. I should add a git ignore because I don't want the Node modules uploaded to my Git repository. It gets too big. Let me just go here and go to my repositories. So notice Node modules isn't here yet. I don't want to include it. So what we want to do is add a git ignore for Node. I've actually put one up on Blackboard. So here's the Git Ignore file for Node. What I'm going to do, if I go to the, so if I click this link in lesson 2, this Git Ignore file for Node, it'll open this repository. So this is from GitHub itself. If I click on raw, here's all the content. So I'm going to copy that. I'm going to add this file into my project. This will prevent all the packages from getting added to my Git repository. I'm going to copy that. And now in my project, I'm going to add a new file, which I will call .git ignore. I'm going to paste in the contents, and you'll notice in here, the Node modules folder is one of the things that gets ignored. Here's the direct link to the file. I've also linked to it on Blackboard. So I'm going to add, now I can do my commit. Lesson 2, part 2, using npm. And now when I push, I should have added my git ignore before. So it did include my dependencies. So I kind of did the, I should have added my git ignore before making my new, adding all my files. That's okay, not the end of the world. But normally we want to keep our Node modules out of our Git repositories. We just track them in package.json instead. I'll make a new project again in another week or two that we'll work with going forward. I will be sure to add the git ignore first next time. Okay, so all of today's code is up on GitHub. If you need to reference any of it, the videos will be uploaded to YouTube a bit later this afternoon. Does anybody have any questions before we break for the week? Tried not to overwhelm you and give you too much too fast. Okay, that's good. Glad you enjoyed it. Thanks for your participation today. I'm not going to be using Visual Studio Code at all. I'm going to be using WebStorm. You are free to use Visual Studio Code if you like, but I'm going to use WebStorm exclusively. Thanks, Jason. Bye, Jillian. Bye, Simon. Have a great week. Thanks, Chris. You too. Thanks, Artem. All right. Enjoy the week, everybody. You too, Raymond.